Producer Joe here from the Working Fans Podcast. And at the Working Fans Podcast, this is just a podcast that three lifelong fans created to have a place to talk comedy and pro wrestling. Now, our comedy podcast releases every Tuesday, while our wrestling podcast releases every Thursday. We release bonus episodes under the moniker Working Fans Presents every now and then. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, any major podcast provider. The important thing is just please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to us. Now, we have started a new thing. We are now on Amazon and Audible. So those episodes release every Monday. And that's kind of going through the archives and just releasing our old episodes into new areas. So if you want to live through the process with us again, take that journey with us again, you can find us over on Amazon and Audible. Now, if you can't get enough of us in the audio form, check out our YouTube. It's youtube.com/C/Working Fans Wrestling Pod, or just search Working Fans Podcast on YouTube. We have the whole archive is up there. And if you listen to the Working Fans Podcast, you are more than familiar with the 531. That is our signature segment where we take your top 5 list on a particular subject, vote it down to a top 3, and then debate it down to a top 1. Now, guys, if you want to hear 3 guys talk shit about comedy, wrestling, life, anything, you will enjoy the Working Fans Podcast. Welcome back for Working Fans Podcast, episode, what are we, 105 now, I think?
Oh, we won something, baby. We got so much episodes. Man, people want to change our name. I told you about that feedback we got. Some girl was talking about, got to change that logo, all that stuff, you know, but she listened to the show, so I don't know.
Yep, Working Fans Podcast, episode 105, top Paul Orndorff matches. It's me. It's the man they call Dave, and just in the nick of time, coming from God knows where, AJ Strangebrew, because
we're live.
He would not miss top Paul Orndorff matches of 531.
I'm sorry, guys. I just flew in from Japan. I've been vaccinating all the Joshi women. I'm sorry. I'm trying to help.
That's all right, man. You got in this here. We're recording, right? We're ready. We're in it.
Yeah. Now, guys. Top Paul Orndorff matches. This is something that's important to both of you more so than me. Kind of share your thoughts of Paul Orndorff before we go into these matches.
Paul Orndorff was the very first bad guy I ever liked. I don't know. It was the red robe, the pile driver. I just thought he was cool as shit. And I was super happy when he was a babyface. But even when he became a babyface as a young kid who still kind of believed in the business, I was like, I don't trust this guy. There's something about him. And, then he turned on our hero, as AJ would call him, the great Hulk Hogan. And he said that, he was like, I knew something was up because, he tried to call Hulk and Hulk was busy doing a workout. And I'm like, that ain't going to sit right with Mr. Wonderful. And sure enough, following week, Orndorff power drove his ass. So, but I was always a big fan of Paul.
So there was just something Paul Orndorff had. First of all, one of the best physiques I've ever seen in wrestling. He looked like what you would expect a superstar to look like. He had a cool nickname, the Brandon Bull, which wasn't always used, obviously. But from time to time, that's what Gorilla Monsoon would call him because he's from Brandon, Florida. He was a football player. He grew up in that Florida area. He just absolutely tremendous athlete. But he always had that face that looked like a bad guy. no matter how much he was trying to be a good guy and how much he was saying like good guy words, his face just said, "I want to kill you." And it was very hard for me to ever believe him as a good guy, but he was the second heel that I could remember that was that cool heel. Obviously, Superstar Billy Graham was the first one that I remembered being like that, but then Paul Orndorff was that cool heel. There was just something about him. And I still think he beat Hogan for the championship. His feet hit the ground first.
All right, since Mr. Wonderful died a couple weeks ago, we want to pick his top matches and go over them. And the first list I got is from Dave Fabe. He's got Paul Orndorff versus Ox Baker in an arm wrestling match he saw on Mid-South TV. We got Orndorff versus Tito Santana for the IC title. He saw this on the MSG network back in the day. He's a little bit of an older fan. Obviously, he's got Hogan and T versus Orndorff and Piper. He's got, guys, he went to a UWF event in New York, and he saw Orndorff go over Valentine. And then that
was the crappy UWF, too. That wasn't the good UWF. That was crappy. That's a good match.
Yeah, he said it was a bright spot in an otherwise shaky card. And then his last match was Orndorff versus Arn, Clash of the Champions 11.
Oh, yeah. Talk about two tough customers.
I think Orndorff's later work is a little underrated, to be honest with you.
That stuff he did at WCW, NWA, was great.
I enjoyed Pretty Wonderful with him and Paul Roma.
We actually have a list coming up that is along those same lines. But, Dave, what's the first list you got for us today?
All right, my friends, let's get right to it. I'm prepared. Hold on a second here. We got Randy Osga. All right, everybody's favorite. He's got Mr. Wonderful versus Hulk Hogan, the steel cage main event from Saturday night's main event.
Yeah.
That's hard to argue with it.
That's a hard one to beat.
He's got Orndorff versus Piper from Saturday night's main event, October 5th, 85. Paul Orndorff versus Cactus Jack, Falls Count Anywhere match, Super Brawl 3, February 21st, 1993. Also, Paul Orndorff, Iron Anderson from that Clash of Champions you talked about. And he's got the original WrestleMania. In terms of historical significance, I can see where a lot of people might have that first Mania match. Man, that Cactus Jack shit, in particular what AJ was talking about, his later work in WCW, his stuff with Cactus Jack was just off the page. I thought was really good. And Cactus was a big part of that. As tough as Mr. Wonderful was, Cactus Mick Foley really went out of his way, too, taking some crazy bumps for Paul at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about Paul Orndorff in that time period also is you can already see that he's having nerve damage and trouble with his arm because he did whatever, God knows what, pinched what nerve or what caused the atrophy, but you could already see that one of his arms is struggling. And that match with Cactus Jack was just out of this world.
Yep. Now, it's funny you bring up Orndorff versus Cactus Jack because Al Hunt is the next list I have. And
is he related to Mike?
His little brother.
Now, I like him.
His first match is Survivor Series 87, Butch Reed, Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy, Rick Rude, and the One-Man Gang versus Bigelow, Morocco, Hogan, Patera, and Orndorff. A little bit of an older fan, and he's a sucker for the Survivor Series. His second match, Paul Orndorff versus Cactus Jack, Super Brawl 3. Another UWF one. This is funny. Orndorff beat Orton for the Southern States title on a UWF Fury Hour, a forgotten TV show in most people's eyes. He's got Pretty Wonderful versus Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan, Back Beach 1994. And he's got Hogan and T versus Orndorff and Piper, WrestleMania 1.
So far, that WrestleMania match has been on everybody's list. So.
Yes, it has.
I don't know if it's necessarily, again, like the greatest match if you ever see it, but it certainly is. I mean, you talk about a claim to fame, being on the original WrestleMania main event.
Yeah. The claim to fame is that Orton was the only one who was willing to do the job in the match.
Well, Paul took the pin, but Orton had to,
But he was the only one who was willing to. Piper wasn't willing to do a job. Obviously, you weren't going to job out T or Hogan. So it had to be Orndorff.
Right, true.
Now, who do you got for your next list, Dave?
I got our boy Jesse from New Hampshire. He also has the first Mania main event. He's also got that Hogan Cage match from Saturday Night's Main Event 87. He's got Morocco Mania 2. He's got the Cactus.
Son of a bitch.
He's got the Cactus Jack Falls Count Anywhere Super Brawl 3, and he's got Ricky Steamboat TV title Clash of the Champions.
Wow,
that's a good one. Well, the good thing about New Hampshire is they haven't actually gotten the UWF events yet. They're coming to live cable next year for them. So.
All right, I've got
Excited
it
for them.
The next list I got is from Mike Allen. Now, he was big into WCW in 1994, so he's got Pretty Wonderful defeated Stars and Stripes, the Patriot, and Marcus Alexander Bagwell on a WCW Saturday.
That might be the only list Marcus Bagwell ever makes.
He's got Pretty Wonderful defeated the Nasty Boys on WCW Saturday night. He was a big Pretty Wonderful mark. He was at Slamboree 94, where Pretty Wonderful, his favorite tag team, got to take on the Armstrongs, Brad and Brian, and he said it was a hell of a match. And then he's got Flying Brian and Sting defeated Pretty Wonderful, and he's got that. Since he was such a Paul Orndorff mark, he went back and watched the Mania 1 match, and like Dave said, it wasn't the greatest match, but since he liked Orndorff so much, he took in the historical significance of it.
That Armstrong match was probably a dark match, or maybe on the Sunday Night's Main Event version of that Super Brawl too, because I don't know if that made the actual pay-per-view. But either way, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it was the dark match. It was at that Slamboree.
Slamboree
might have showed up on something.
Yeah.
So I'm working on going back to training right now, and one of the places I'm talking to is Paradise Alley by Paul Roma. I will let him know that he's got a huge fan out there of Pretty Wonderful, and he made our top list 5 times on that kid's card.
Yeah, Mike Allen. Now, AJ, why don't you give us your list, and then how many more lists you got there, Dave?
I got one more than mine. So
all right.
So my list is actually, I have Bob Orton Jr. also, but I have it from November 7th, 1985. It's one of the wrestling classics. If you go back on the WWE Network, they have the wrestling classics on there now. Sorry, Peacock Wrestling Network or whatever the fuck you want to call it. They're starting to show the wrestling classics, and one of the ones they have on there is Bob Orton Jr. Actually against Paul Orndorff, and Paul Orndorff wins by DQ with interference by Rowdy Piper. So that's a good little match. I got the Saturday Night's Main Event actually against Adrian Adonis, where Adrian Adonis wins by disqualification. Paul Orndorff actually gets disqualified. He hits Adrian Adonis with his own whatever that perfume thing was from the flower shop. Another one that I have is actually the big event, August 28th, 1986. Hulk Hogan defeated Paul Orndorff by disqualification. I have Paul Orndorff the match versus Cactus Jack, just like everybody else has, because to me that was just hard hitting and really started to show what Cactus could do when he got to WCW. And then the other one that I have is, this is to me a little bit of a lost one. It's from June 8th of 1987. Orndorff had just turned heel again, obviously, but he's wrestling Ken Patera and on the June 87 show, and it's absolutely fantastic. Ken Patera, it's really one of the last good matches he had. At that point, he had come back with the brown hair and couldn't really move the way he used to move, but they pulled down a hell of a match.
All right, now for the sake of time, Dave, since we're up against the clock, I don't know.
I got it. Don't worry. All right, Mike Cadwell from the Mikey and Fred page. He has Paul Orndorff versus Bob Orton for that same wrestling classic match. You think AJ ripped off this list? He's got Paul Orndorff versus Adrian Adonis from Saturday Night's Main Event. He's got Paul Orndorff versus Hulk Hogan from the big event. All right, here's where it's going to differ. He's got Paul Orndorff versus B. Brian Blair, joint in progress. The Paula chants are coming in loud and very clear, and Orndorff isn't happy. Very good match. July 7th, 84. I wonder if that's a nope, that's got to be WWE at that time. And then he's got Hogan and Paul Orndorff versus the Moondogs. He doesn't say this, but that is the emphasis match where Orndorff turns on Hogan afterwards.
Yeah, that's the one where he actually turns on him and clotheslines him out of his boots.
And since we're short on time, I will go immediately to my list. I got Hogan versus Orndorff in that cage as well. Also versus Wonderful versus Cactus Jack, like everybody else. I got Wonderful versus Hogan in that big event, like AJ does. I will add that was a event that was made for VHS, and it drew 74,000 people in Toronto.
I would like to point out that Dave has seen Mike's list, and I had not, so maybe one of us stole it.
I also have Brian Pillman, Dustin Rhodes, and Steve Austin.
That's a good one.
Brian Pillman, Sting, and Dustin Rhodes versus Steve Austin and Paul Orndorff and Rick Rude. And that was the Thunderdome cage match, Super Brawl 94. And I have the Mania 1 main event as well. Okay, for the sake of time, guys, I'll get this ball rolling. I think the Mania 1 main event's got to be in there. The cage match has got to be in there.
Jack's got to be in there.
And I'll throw Cactus Jack in there. All right? And one of them's got to go. Sorry, Mick. We love you. Bang, bang. You're out of here. And that's going to leave the 2. And I'll tell you what, AJ, I'll let you fucking pick it. Do you want to go with historical significance, or do you want to go that cage match, which honestly is pretty historic?
I'm going with the cage match because I still think Orndorff hit first, and the WrestleMania match sucked.
You know what? I agree. 5-3-1. Fucking pile driver. Hogan, you lost. We're out.